Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Savannah, and today we're going to be talking about the changing of seasons in the garden. This was my second year gardening, and I was really put to the test. I had voles and deer and vine borers and cabbage moths and powdery mildew, but through it all I still had plenty of produce and much more than I could have eaten. So as the seasons change, I'm focusing on saving seeds and saving the produce to have throughout the winter. I was very happy to be growing cantaloupe again this year. Last year, my cantaloupe were completely eaten by insects and I didn't get one single melon. But this year I planted plenty, so I had enough to share with all the creatures that came to eat some. I was very happy to find a seeded watermelon that I had with family and save some of the seeds from that to try to grow next year. I was really looking forward to growing soybeans this year. But unfortunately, a deer jumped the fence and ate all the leaves off the plants, so they were kind of underdeveloped and maybe not quite mature, but I'm saving them anyway, and we'll try to plant them next year. The garden almost doubled in size this year. I got a bunch of free plants from a farm stand that was throwing out their starts that they couldn't sell. I couldn't let them just be thrown out, so I planted all of them, and basically all of these eggplants were free, but I don't really use eggplant that often, so I decided to roast them and freeze them so that I could use them as I wanted to in pastas or stir fries. I just roasted them at 350 for about 15 minutes before I flash froze them and stored them into airtight containers. I'd love to have some suggestions for what to make with all the eggplant, so if you have any ideas, feel free to leave them down in the comments. Tomatoes are always one of my favorite things to eat during the summer, and they just taste so much better homegrown than from the store. This pasta sauce is super simple with just salt and tomatoes cooked down until most of the moisture has evaporated. In the spring, I tried canning for the first time when I was saving my string beans, but I find freezing to be a lot simpler as long as you have the room for it. I was using these sauces right away for making a lasagna, but if you're freezing it, just make sure to leave a bit more room at the top of the jars. Unfortunately, some of my tomato plants ended up getting a bacterial infection, which doesn't affect the fruit. It's still safe to eat, but you aren't able to save the seeds for next year. Luckily, my cherry tomatoes were nice and healthy, so I squeezed out the seeds, and I'm gonna pour some water over them and ferment them to remove the outer coating. Squeezing out the insides and getting out excess moisture is the first step in making sun-dried tomatoes, so that's what I decided to do with the tomatoes I use for seeds. Drying them out nice and slow at low heat really concentrates all the tomatoiness and saves all those summer flavors. If you've ever grown zucchini, I'm sure you know that there's always an abundance. I was pretty hands-off with the zucchini, so they did get a little bigger than they should have. And so a lot of the seeds matured in them, which is great if you want to save seeds for next year's garden, but they don't actually taste that good. So I just scooped out the insides and fed them to my parents' chickens. Once all the insides were scooped out, I went ahead and chopped them up, and I'm going to be blanching them, which is a fancy way of saying you boil them and then quickly toss them into some ice water to stop the cooking process. Another way I decided to freeze the zucchini is by shredding it, and that's really great for making zucchini bread or any sort of pasta. I got ready to blanch the zucchini by boiling a pot of salt water and preparing an ice bath. It only needs to cook in the hot water for about 2 minutes. After blanching the zucchini, I set it on a tray, dried off a bit of the excess water, and flash froze them for about a half an hour. I stored the shredded zucchini in a jar with plenty of room for it to expand when it freezes. Once the zucchini chunks were frozen solid, I just put them all into an airtight glass container. Another one of my favorite things about the summer is the herb garden, so here I'm just trimming some oregano to save and dry out for the winter. I hung the oregano to dry by tying small bundles with some twine and then hanging it in a nice sunny window. I had so much kale this year. I had started some from seeds and then also got some more free plants. So I've been using it in everything I can think of, in pastas and salads, but there's still an abundance. So I decided to freeze some for the winter. Because I don't spray with anything in the garden, there does tend to be some bugs who like to live in the kale, especially cabbage moths, so I like to wipe them down really well and then give them a good rinse in some salty ice water. Food waste is a huge problem, and a lot of times we have expectations for our food to look a certain way and to look perfect. But just because a bug has nibbled a few leaves doesn't mean it's not good to eat. And really the bugs are only eating it because it's good. I prepared the kale the same way that I did the zucchini, but it cooks for a bit shorter of a time. And once it comes out of the ice bath, I squeeze out all the excess moisture and lay it all flat on a tray to freeze until it's solid before putting it into airtight containers. I try to be a student of nature, and learning from the garden, I've seen that keeping things within the cycle, using what you have, isn't just good for building a resilient system. It's also often the most frugal choice. Nature operates in cycles where everything has a purpose. I try to practice this by keeping all the nutrients that I can within the system by composting my food scraps and the plant materials that I harvest. There are 3 main ingredients to making compost, and that's nitrogen, carbon, and oxygen. You can add nitrogen to your compost by adding things like food scraps and lawn clippings. You can add carbon to your compost bin by adding things like mulch or fall leaves or even paper. The types of microorganisms that make compost need an oxygen-rich environment, an aerobic environment that has plenty of air. In places like landfills that are compacted, food breaks down very slowly in an environment that doesn't have enough oxygen. That slow breakdown causes the release of potent greenhouse gases. So spinning your compost or turning it with a pitchfork is super important. The typical stinky smell of trash actually comes from the microorganisms breaking the food down without enough oxygen. If the compost is getting a little stinky, chances are you just need to aerate it a bit or add a bit more carbon. An active compost bin should be nice and warm and have just a little bit of an earthy smell. Returning our food scraps to the soil keeps the nutrients within the system and keeps the soil alive. A living soil plays an important role in making the nutrients available for plants to use. Another way to provide your plants with plenty of food is by making a natural fertilizer like this one here, which is a fermented plant juice. This type of fertilizer is basically free to make. It just requires a bit of brown sugar, some fresh plant materials, and water. This mixture is left to sit and naturally ferments, which releases all the nutrients and makes them more available to the plants. This recipe is used and developed by a type of agriculture called Korean natural farming, and it really focuses on using what you have available in the garden. Using permaculture methods of gardening and farming is all about building resilience. So although I might have insects and voles, I also have equal amounts of predatory bugs and snakes that all balance out the system so that there's enough to go around for everyone. Everything in the garden has a role to play, and it can be easy to want to control everything, but sometimes if we just learn to let go, things usually turn out just the way that they were supposed to be. Thank you all for watching, and if you'd like to support my channel, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.